The envelope from the university arrived on a Tuesday, thick and cream-colored, the kind of paper that already smelled like a different life. I didn't open it in the kitchen. I carried it up to my room, sat on the edge of my bed and slid my thumb under the flap like I was defusing something. Congratulations. I read the word 4 times before it became real. Then I screamed, an actual scream, the kind I hadn't let out of my body since I was a kid, and ran downstairs so fast I nearly took the stairs 2 at a time in socks. My mother was at the stove. My father was still in his work clothes, tie loosened, scrolling through his phone at the table. My sister, Rema, was sprawled on the couch in the next room, one earbud in, laughing at something on her phone. I got in, I said. I got in. My mother turned from the stove holding a spoon that dripped sauce onto the floor and neither of us cared. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped. For about 90 seconds, our kitchen was the happiest place in the world. My father hugged me so hard my ribs complained. My mother cried into a dish towel, the good kind of crying, the kind that comes out sideways because you're also laughing. Rema appeared in the doorway. She looked at the letter in my hand, then at our parents' faces, then at me. Cool, she said and went back to the couch. I didn't think anything of it then. Rema was 22, 2 years older than me, and she'd never been what you'd call an academic. She'd dropped out of community college after 1 semester of pre-nursing, tried a cosmetology course, quit that too, and had spent the last year working part-time at a juice bar and living at home. My acceptance letter, full ride, need-based aid on top of merit, wasn't a comparison so much as a different sport entirely. I didn't expect her to care the way our parents cared. I didn't need her to. I should have paid more attention to the exact shape of her face in that doorway. I know now it wasn't boredom. It was calculation. 3 weeks later, Rema started coughing. Not dramatic, not right away. A small, polite cough at dinner, covered by her fist, the kind you clear from allergies or a scratchy throat. My mother, who worries about everyone in our family with the intensity of a woman managing a hospital ward, asked if she was getting sick. I'm fine, Rema said. Probably just the AC. The cough didn't go away. It got a texture to it. Wet, then dry, then wet again, like she'd rehearsed variations. She started losing weight, which she blamed on a gut thing. A new smoothie cleanse she said she'd started at the juice bar. She started being tired all the time, going to bed at 8, sleeping until 11. My mother hovered. My father started leaving work early to take her to just get it checked out. I was deep in the fog of senior year, AP tests, scholarship paperwork, a part-time job at the library to save spending money for the fall, and I noticed the shift in our house's weather without fully clocking the storm forming inside it. Dinner conversations that used to be about my classes, my plans, the excitement of the fall, slowly rerouted to Rema. Her cough. Her fatigue. Her appointments. I remember the exact night it tipped. We were at the table. My mother had made my favorite dish, garlic lemon chicken, something she made when she wanted to celebrate, and I'd just gotten an email about freshman orientation dates. They want us to pick a move-in day, I said, scanning my phone. There's a whole week of orientation stuff, I guess I could. Not now, baby, my mother said, not unkindly, but with the specific weariness of someone whose attention had already left the room. Rema has her scan results tomorrow. I put my phone down. What scan? My mother looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. We didn't want to worry you during exams, my mother said. Rema found a lump. We've been doing some tests. The garlic lemon chicken suddenly tasted like nothing. The scan results came back with a word that flattens a house from the inside. Lymphoma. Stage 2, Rema said, according to the doctor. She cried when she told us, her voice thin and shaking, and my mother folded around her like a wing, and my father, a man I had seen cry exactly twice in my life, once at his own father's funeral, put his forehead down on the table and made a sound I'd never heard him make. I sat there in the wreckage of that dinner and felt something I would spend the next year being ashamed of. A flicker, small and ugly, of why now? Why 3 weeks after my acceptance letter, after 18 years of being the daughter who colored outside every line our family drew, did Rema suddenly need a scan? I hated myself for the thought. I buried it fast, under guilt, under love, under the simple animal fact that my sister might be dying and I was standing in a kitchen thinking about myself. I want to be honest about what came next because it's the part that makes this story what it is, and I won't sand down my own complicity in believing her. For the next several months I was a good sister. I drove Rema to 2 appointments myself when my parents' schedules conflicted. I sat with her during a chemo session, her hooked up to an 4-pole, a soft blue blanket over her knees, her hair still full because the doctor said it might take a few rounds before it falls out. I held her hand. I researched lymphoma treatment protocols online until 2 a.m. so I could ask her oncologist better questions. I deferred my enrollment. That's the piece that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it. I called the university, I explained a family medical emergency, and I deferred my acceptance for a year. The admissions office was kind about it. They told me my spot, my scholarship, my full ride, it would all be waiting. 1 year. A gap year to be there for my sister. My mother cried with gratitude when I told her. My father hugged me and said I was the strong one. Rema, from her spot on the couch under a blanket even in July, looked at me with an expression I read as love and gratitude. I know now it was something closer to satisfaction. The deferred year became in our house entirely Rema's. Every conversation, every family dinner, every ounce of attention orbited her illness. My parents drained a chunk of their retirement savings on alternative treatments, a naturopath recommended alongside her official chemo, supplements for vitamin drips at a wellness clinic, a $4,000 course of something called immune reconditioning that I now understand was pure theater. My mother quit her part-time job at the dental office to be Rema's full-time caretaker. My father took out a small loan against the house, ostensibly for medical bills insurance didn't cover. I worked. I picked up more hours at the library than a second job at a coffee shop on weekends, because someone needed to help cover groceries while my parents' income shrank and their spending on Rema grew. I put my acceptance letter in a drawer and didn't look at it for months, because looking at it felt selfish, felt like betraying a sister who might be dying while I dreamed about dorm rooms and seminar tables. There were moments that, in retrospect, should have cracked the story open for me. Rema's chemo days never lined up neatly. Sometimes she'd come home from a session glowing with energy, ready to go out for ice cream, and other days she'd be flattened for no clear reason on days she hadn't had treatment at all. She refused, gently but firmly, to let any of us come into the exam rooms with her after the first few visits, saying the clinic had privacy policies. She switched oncologists twice, each time citing a doctor who wasn't listening to her, or didn't believe in a holistic approach, which meant no continuity of records any of us ever actually saw. When I offered more than once to help organize her medical paperwork, insurance claims, appointment summaries, the practical drudgery I was good at, she always had a reason it wasn't necessary yet. "I've got a system," she'd say. "You don't need to worry about that. Just worry about being here." Being here became my whole identity that year. Rema took it, wore it like a crown, and every so often when the topic of my deferred admission came up, a friend from high school posting dorm photos, a cousin asking when I was finally starting college, Rema would say something that at the time I read as dark humor born of illness, but that I now understand as the whole point. "Guess smart doesn't matter much when you're sick," she said once, propped up on pillows, flipping through a magazine while I sorted her pill organizer for the week. "Sick beats smart in this house." She laughed when she said it. I laughed too because what else do you do? I thought it was gallows humor from a girl facing cancer at 22. I didn't understand yet that it was a mission statement. The first real crack came almost a year in April from the most unglamorous source imaginable, a mixed-up pharmacy bill. My mother, exhausted and drowning in medical paperwork, asked me to call our insurance company about a claim that had been denied for one of Rema's treatments. I sat on hold for 40 minutes, transferred twice, and finally got a representative who pulled up Rema's file to explain the denial. "I'm showing no oncology claims on this account for the past 11 months, the woman said, sounding almost as confused as I felt. "There's a primary care visit in September, and a dermatology referral in November. That's it." I told her she must be looking at the wrong account. I gave her Rema's full name, date of birth, policy number, everything. She checked again. "That's what's on file," she said. "I'm sorry, I don't have anything else to go on. Would you like me to escalate this to billing?" I hung up and sat very still in my room for a long time. There were explanations, I told myself. Maybe the naturopathic clinic billed under a different code. Maybe her oncologist's office was slow updating records. Maybe, I built myself a whole scaffolding of maybes because the alternative was a hole I wasn't ready to fall into. But once the doubt got in, it didn't leave. I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to notice. The wig Rema wore, for comfort even though my hair's still growing back thin, that never seemed to actually reveal thinning hair underneath when I glimpsed her without it late at night walking to the bathroom, a full head of hair pulled back in a loose bun. The chemo fog, that vanished instantly whenever her boyfriend, Dante, called, replaced by hours of animated laughing on the phone. The infusion clinic she went to that, when I looked it up online out of idle curiosity one night, had a website so sparse and unprofessional it barely looked real. No listed physicians, no accreditation badges, just a stock photo of a smiling nurse and a phone number. I called that number once from a blocked line, pretending to be a new patient asking about their lymphoma treatment program. A confused-sounding man answered and told me I had the wrong number, that this was a small aesthetics clinic that did vitamin 4 drips and Botox. I sat on my bedroom floor with my back against the door and cried without making a sound, because the thing cracking open in me wasn't relief. It was rage so total and so cold it scared me more than any diagnosis could have. I didn't confront Rema right away. I needed proof, not because I doubted what I'd found but because I understood, somewhere animal and instinctive, that Rema would deny everything the second I gave her the chance, and that our parents, a year deep into grief, sacrifice and devotion, would believe her over me. I had watched them rearrange their entire lives around her illness. I needed something undeniable. So I became a detective in my own house. I started keeping a log, dates and times, cross-referenced against her stated appointments. I photographed the pharmacy bottles she left on the bathroom counter, unlabeled orange bottles she claimed were anti-nausea medication, and searched the imprint codes online during my coffee shop breaks. 2 were vitamin supplements. 1 was a common migraine medication. None were chemotherapy drugs or their standard companions. I found the wig receipt tucked in an old purse while helping my mother clean out the hall closet, purchased 14 months earlier, a full 2 months before Rema's supposed diagnosis. A synthetic costume wig bought online, the kind sold for Halloween and theater productions, not medical use. The final piece came from Dante, though he didn't know he was giving it to me. I ran into him at a gas station in March and made careless small talk, asking how he was holding up with everything going on with Rema. He looked at me strangely. "She seems good actually," he said. "Way less stressed than she used to be about money and like figuring out her life. Honestly, the calmest I've seen her in years." I asked, careful and light, if he ever went with her to appointments. "Nah, she likes to keep that stuff private," he said. I offered like twice. She said it stresses her out more to have people there. I thanked him, got back in my car and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make my hands stop shaking enough to drive. I waited for a night when my parents had gone to a neighbor's dinner party, one of the rare evenings in over a year they'd allowed themselves to leave the house without Rema. I sat down across from her in the living room, the same couch where she'd first said "cool" to my acceptance letter what felt like 100 years ago, and I put the folder of everything I'd gathered on the coffee table between us. "I need you to explain some things to me," I said. Rema looked at the folder, then at me, and something in her face didn't do what I expected. It didn't crumble. It didn't panic. It went very still and very flat, like a curtain dropping on a stage. "Explain what?" she said. Not a question. A dare. I opened the folder. I laid it out. The insurance records, the wig receipt dated before her diagnosis, the fake clinic, the pill bottles, Dante's confused face at the gas station. My voice shook the whole time, not from doubt but from the effort of staying calm enough to get through the whole list without screaming. When I finished, there was a long silence. Rema picked up the wig receipt, looked at it, and set it back down with something close to a shrug. "Okay," she said. "So you did some digging. That's it? That's your response? What do you want me to say?" Her voice had a strange, tired edge to it, like I was the one being unreasonable. "You want me to cry? Beg you not to tell Mom and Dad." "I want you to tell me why," I said. "I want you to tell me why you did this." Rema leaned back into the couch cushions, and for the first time in over a year, I watched my sister's face rearrange itself into something I hadn't seen since the day I got my acceptance letter. Not sick. Not fragile. Bored almost. Bored and a little amused, the way you look at someone who's just figured out a magic trick you never thought they'd solve. "You got into your fancy school," she said. "You got the scholarship, the letter, the whole proud parent show. Mom cried for like an hour. Dad hugged you like you cured something. And what did I get? I got, 'Why can't you be more like your sister?' I got that my whole life, every report card, every time you won something, every family dinner where it was just her. So you gave yourself cancer. I gave myself attention, she said, and something in the calm precision of it made my stomach turn over. You want to know what it's like to watch your little sister get everything just by being smart, while you're the screw-up who can't finish community college. You have no idea what it's like to sit at that table every single night and be a footnote in your own family's story. So the answer was to lie about being sick? To let mom quit her job? To let dad take out a loan on the house? Do you understand what you took from them? From me? I deferred my acceptance for you. I gave up a year of my life. Rema's face flickered, the first genuine crack I'd seen, but it closed almost as fast as it opened. You didn't have to defer, she said. That was your choice. You let me believe you were dying. I let everyone believe what they wanted to believe, she said, and her voice had gone cold now, stripped of the tremor and softness she'd worn like a costume for over a year. You want to know the truth? For the first time in my whole life I was the center of this family. Everyone looked at me. Everyone was scared for me. Everyone loved me the hardest they've ever loved anything. And you want me to apologize for that? You're not going to, I said slowly, understanding for the first time fully who I was talking to. You're not sorry at all. Rema stood up, walked to the kitchen, and got herself a glass of water like we were discussing weekend plans instead of a 15-month fraud that had gutted our family's savings and stolen a year of my life. Sick beats smart in this house, she said from the kitchen, not even looking at me. You should have figured that out sooner. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with the folder on my lap until the sun came up, running through every possible way to tell my parents that their daughter, the one they had reorganized their entire lives around, the one they'd drained their savings for, the one my father had taken out a loan against our house for, had faked a 15-month cancer diagnosis for attention. I decided, in the end, that I owed them the truth delivered plainly without cushioning, because cushioning was exactly the kind of soft handling that had let this go on so long. I waited until Sunday morning when Rema had left early for a follow-up scan I now knew didn't exist, and I sat my parents down at the kitchen table with the folder between us. I will not pretend this was easy. I will not pretend I did it gracefully. I cried through most of it, hands shaking as I laid out receipt after receipt, screenshot after screenshot, the phone number for the fake clinic, the timeline of the wig purchase predating the diagnosis by 2 months. My mother's face went through an entire spectrum of human expression in the space of 10 minutes. Confusion, defensive anger. How dare you accuse your sister? Then a terrible dawning horror as she cross-referenced dates in her own memory, until finally she put both hands over her mouth and made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. My father didn't say anything for a long time. He picked up the wig receipt, read it twice, and set it down with hands that had gone very steady in a way that scared me more than shaking would have. Call her, he said quietly. Tell her to come home. Now. Rema came home 2 hours later, walking through the front door with a coffee in hand, humming, completely unaware that the house had transformed into a courtroom in her absence. She stopped humming the second she saw all 3 of our faces. What followed was not a screaming match, though there was screaming. It was worse than that. It was the sound of a family's foundation cracking in real time, each fracture audible. My mother sobbed and demanded to know how Rema could let her quit her job, could let her spend 15 months of her life in terror, grieving a daughter who was never dying. My father, quieter but somehow more devastating, asked her over and over in a flat voice, the loan, the house. Do you understand what you did to this family's house? Rema, to her credit or her damnation, I still haven't decided which, did not fully break character even then. She cried, but it felt performative, the same practiced tremor she'd used on doctor's appointments she'd never actually attended. She offered fragments of justification. You never paid attention to me. I just wanted to matter for once. I didn't think it would go on this long. That felt less like remorse and more like a defense attorney testing arguments for a jury. It was my father who finally said the thing that ended it. He stood up from the table, looked at Rema with an expression I had genuinely never seen on his face in 20 years and said, I don't know who you are. He didn't yell it. That was the terrible part. He said it the way you'd state a fact about the weather. What happened over the following months was less a single explosion and more a slow, grinding unraveling, the kind that takes longer than the lie itself did to build. My parents consulted a lawyer mostly to understand what recourse they had, though in the end they chose not to pursue formal fraud charges against their own daughter. A decision that took my mother weeks of sleepless nights to reach, weighing the public shame and family fracture of prosecution against the private wound of doing nothing. What they did do was cut Rema off financially entirely and immediately. No more rent contribution, no more loans that were never repaid, no more covering her phone bill or car insurance. She was required to move out within 30 days. My mother went back to work at the dental office, though the position had been filled and she had to start over at a different practice at a lower rate, a year behind where she'd have been. My father restructured the loan against the house into a longer, more painful repayment plan, one that will follow my parents for years. There is a version of retirement they were planning for that no longer exists, replaced by a slower, more anxious version, built on the wreckage of a hoax. Rema, for her part, did not disappear into visible ruin the way you might expect from a story like this. She moved in with Dante, who, after an excruciating conversation I was not present for but heard about secondhand, chose to stay with her, a decision that still confuses me, though I've stopped trying to understand other people's tolerance for things I couldn't tolerate myself. She got a full-time job at a different juice bar chain. She posted occasionally on social media, smiling captions about new beginnings and growth, never once referencing the 15 months prior, as though she'd simply skipped that chapter of her own life and expected the rest of us to do the same. We do not speak, Rema and I. Not out of some dramatic vow of silence, but because there has simply been nothing left to say since the afternoon she stood in our kitchen and told me without flinching, that sick beats smart in our house. I want to be honest about the part of this story that isn't about Rema because I think it's the part that matters most in the end, the part about what a year like that does to the person left standing in the wreckage of someone else's lie. For a long time after the truth came out, I was angrier at myself than I was at her. I ran the timeline over and over, hunting for the moment I should have known, the moment a smarter or less trusting version of me would have caught it faster and spared my parents 6 more months of savings, spared myself 6 more months of a life I didn't get to live. I replayed every sick beats smart comment Rema had ever made and wondered how I'd missed the venom folded inside the joke. But somewhere in the months that followed, after Rema moved out, after my parents began the long, ugly process of rebuilding their finances and their trust in their own judgment, after the dinner table in our house slowly, awkwardly began to be a place where people talked about ordinary things again, weather and work and, eventually, cautiously me, I stopped being able to sustain that particular flavor of self-blame. I had believed my sister because she was my sister, because believing the people you love is not a character flaw, it's the whole basis of being able to love people at all. The failure wasn't mine. It was hers, engineered and sustained brick by careful brick, precisely because she understood better than any of us exactly how much we'd give her if she asked for it in the language of illness instead of the language of need. I called the university in September, 9 months after the confrontation, and asked whether my deferred spot could be reactivated for the following fall. The admissions office, to my endless gratitude, said yes. The scholarship, the seat, all of it, waiting exactly where I'd left it a year and a half earlier, patient in a way my family had not had the luxury of being. I moved into my dorm on a bright, ordinary Saturday in late August, nearly 2 years after the letter that started all of this arrived in our mailbox. My mother cried packing boxes into the car, the same helpless, sideways crying from that first celebratory night in the kitchen, except this time it came with an edge of something raw and grateful, like she couldn't quite believe we'd both made it to this day intact. My father carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint, sweat soaking through his shirt, refusing every offer of help from me or my roommate's dad, like the physical labor of it was something he needed his body to do, some penance or proof he couldn't put into words. Before they left, my mother held my face in both hands the way she used to when I was small and said, "I am so sorry it took us this long to get you here." I told her the truth, that I didn't blame her, that none of us could have known, that the only person who owed anyone an apology in this story had already made clear, standing in our kitchen with a glass of water in her hand, that she wasn't going to give one. My father hugged me at the car longer than usual and said, quiet enough that only I could hear it, "You were always the strong one." I should have said that without the comparison attached. I'm sorry it took your sister almost destroying us for me to understand what that actually meant. I watched their car pull out of the parking lot and disappear around the corner of the building, and I stood there for a long moment in the strange bright quiet of a life finally actually beginning, 2 years late, permanently altered but mine. I heard secondhand through a cousin who still speaks to both of us, that Rema tells a version of this story now in which she was the one who was wronged, misunderstood, unsupported, pushed by our family's obsession with achievement into a breakdown she handled the wrong way. I don't know if she believes that version or if it's simply the newest costume, tailored for whatever audience she's performing for this month. I think about the sentence more than I probably should, turning it over sometimes late at night the way you probe a healed injury just to check it still aches. Sick beats smart in this house. She said it like a joke and then she spent 15 months making it true, and in the end it wasn't even a competition she won. Because the house she meant, the one she thought she'd conquered, doesn't exist as she pictured it anymore. It rearranged itself entirely around the hole she left in it, and built something sturdier and sadder and more honest in its place. I got my Ivy League year. It came 2 years later than the envelope on my bed promised, and it came at a price none of you should have had to pay, but it came. I sit in seminar rooms now, surrounded by people who have no idea what it cost to get here, and some days that anonymity feels like its own kind of mercy. A room where nobody is keeping score of who is sick and who is smart, where I am simply, finally, allowed to just be a student, unwatched, unweighed, whole.